Jazz vocabulary decoded. Have you ever wondered how jazz musicians remember such long and complicated phrases? The answer is that they don't. Many teachers just choose to teach that way. They teach you the sentence method, then tell you to go and practice those licks or musical sentences in all the keys. Unfortunately, that method doesn't stick for many students. It certainly didn't stick for me. So, what if there's an easier way? Would you be interested to learn that? The way I approach jazz improvisation and also teach my students. Stick around to find out the easy way to practice jazz vocabulary in ways that not only can be measured, but also guarantee amazing progress every time you practice.
Hi guys, if you've been told to learn jazz like this, and then learn it in all 12 keys. If you are new to jazz or intermediate jazz student, that is going to be extremely overwhelming. In this video, I'm going to share with you an easier way to break those licks down into much more easier, manageable chunks and steps to learn. If you're new here, my name's Darren Lloyd and I teach intermediate students ways to practice jazz without being overwhelmed. So here we go, we're going to jump straight onto the laptop and check out my screen, and we're going to do two things. We're going to show you how you can deconstruct some jazz phrases or licks, and then I'm also going to show you how to approach soloing and sounding extremely authentic, only using 5 chunks of jazz vocabulary.
Okay, so here we are. This was the first phrase that we heard. Let's have another quick listen. Now, that could be very, very overwhelming. Okay, we've got the D minor 7 going to the G7 to the C7, C major 7. This is sometimes called a 2-5-1. And it's one of the building blocks of Western popular music from the 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. Okay, but if we break that down and just actually learn the chord notes of D minor 7, G7 and C major 7, we can see there's very few vocabulary items that we actually use. So here we're using enclosure, we're using chord notes, we're using chromatic enclosures. Now make sure you stick with me guys, because I'm going to show you a great solo over all the things you are in a moment, where again we're using very few vocabulary items and it sounds super authentic. So rather than learning licks or phrases, long phrases like this without actually understanding what they are, if we actually learn enclosures in a more targeted way, if we learn chromatic enclosures in a more targeted way, if we learn the bebop scale in a more targeted way, it frees us up to actually improvise and not remember licks. So how could we practice this? Let me quickly show you. It's just another phrase that I've done to show you. Let's have a quick listen to that one too. Okay, so here we are just practicing enclosures. So we're enclosing the third. Then we move on to enclose the third. Then we enclose the 7th. Then we enclose the 3rd. And then we enclose the root. Now, the beauty of that, if you know your chord notes and you practice your enclosures, that is super authentic jazz vocabulary that I first noticed Clifford Brown doing that. So that is Clifford Brown jazz vocabulary, which we can practice in a targeted way, and we know whether we are making progress. Okay, so you can practice that over any jazz standard. Next is the chord notes. So here, starting on the 3rd, 5th, 7th, here we go up to the 9th as well. Okay, but pretty much we use the root, the tonic, we use the root, the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, sometimes the 9th. Okay, so if you learn some enclosures, you learn some chord notes, chromatic enclosures. I've got a whole video about this. I'll put that in the description. And we simply chromatically enclose. Again, I got this from Clifford Brown. Clifford, Fats Navarro, people like Freddie Hubbard, great exponents of using chromatic enclosures. Same again, but this time ascending. Now, I see people lots and lots on YouTube talking about learning scales. Now, for me, I very rarely use scales in my solos simply because the people that I love to listen to very rarely use scales. Okay, if you look at Chet's playing, He doesn't use much scales. Blue Mitchell doesn't use a huge amount of scales. It's all this broken up jazz vocabulary. But the reason I like to learn the scales and learn to play within a key center is because the targeting different notes. So da 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 da. Sometimes it looks like a scale, but actually I'm going from the seventh to the third to the third to the seventh to the third. That scale fragments. Okay, forward motion. I got that idea from Hal Galper. I'm going to put a link to Hal's book Forward Motion in the description. It's a fantastic book. And then here we're starting to use two elements of vocabulary. So if we drop that the octave, that would just be the third, the fifth, the seventh, and the ninth. Okay, but by doing this, di-do-do-be-da, di-do-do-dee-da, di-do-do-dee-da, that way we really, again, I call it the fat slick. Some people call it broken chords. Maybe there's another name for it as well. But then we do that da-do-do-dee-da, and then target the third. Da-da-da-da. A little type of enclosure or a scale fragment, we might call that. And there it is again.
Okay guys, we're going to move to the solo now, all the things you are, and I'm going to show you how I've built it up from using the chord notes as the target notes, and then you'll see those different types of vocabulary items that we've spoken about, how I've made up my solo. Guys, you don't need me to go through the whole thing. You can see that I'm using about 5 or 6 different types of vocabulary that I practiced in a targeted way over different jazz standards, and that has really helped me develop my ear-finger coordination. I've learnt the changes first. I know the key center, I know the scales that I'm using for those key centers to help me with the target notes, but I'm using very little vocabulary to actually play quite an authentic sounding jazz solo. So as I mentioned before, these resources are sent to my tier 1 members in the Patreon. I'll put that link in the description. And also already there is a scheme of work on Take the A Train. There's a scheme of work on This Could Happen to You. There's a scheme of work on Watermelon Man, where we break these things down and practice in super targeted way. It's just going to show you how you can practice the way I'm talking about in this lesson, rather than being overwhelmed with a big long lick that contains about 6 pieces of jazz vocabulary. Okay, so really what I'm saying is, here's the structure. Learn the chord notes, learn the scales, and then when you're super authentic with that, of course, start adding some rhythm, which we've already spoken about in previous lessons, and then start adding the vocabulary. That way, you're not going to be overwhelmed, okay? And you can measure your success, you can measure your progress because can you do enclosures in the key of F sharp? Can you do enclosures in the key of B flat? Can you do them in the key of C major? Okay, and then that is really going to help you to get to know your instrument, and you practice it over different jazz standards. Okay guys, thanks for watching the video. Hope it has helped you in some way and demystify things. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.